Two people, same goal, same starting point. Person A relies on motivation, gets excited, creates vision boards, and fails within 3 weeks. Person B uses the 10-second decision rule and microforcing techniques, feels zero motivation most days, yet achieves their goal in 6 months. The difference? Person B discovered what 2025 research calls forced consistency, a psychological framework built on studies showing habits take 59 to 66 days to form, not the mythical 21 days most people believe. This isn't about willpower or waiting to feel ready. It's about specific methods that make your brain do what it doesn't want to do. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to become Person B and join the 8% who actually succeed. But first, you need to understand why the other 92% fail so predictably. The brutal truth about goal statistics. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. Why do most people abandon their biggest goals before Valentine's Day even arrives? I'm talking about those resolutions you made with such certainty just weeks ago. The gym membership that seemed so important in January but now feels like a waste of money. The business idea that had you staying up late researching but now sits forgotten in your notes app. The healthy habits that lasted exactly 11 days before you decided one cheat day wouldn't hurt. The University of Scranton just released their 2025 research, and the numbers are brutal. 92% of people fail to achieve their New Year's resolutions. Think about that for a second. Out of every 100 people who set a goal in January, only 8 will actually reach it. The other 92 will find themselves right back where they started, often feeling worse than before, because now they've added failure to their list of problems. But here's where it gets really interesting. The timeline of failure follows a predictable pattern. Most people don't gradually fade out over months. They crash hard and fast. 43% give up before the end of fast January. The pattern repeats every single year like clockwork, and most people blame themselves for lacking willpower or discipline. That's where everyone gets it wrong. The problem isn't that you're weak or lazy or broken. The problem is a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement actually works. Habit formation studies show that motivation-based approaches decay by week 3 because your brain's initial excitement naturally diminishes. Most people operate under the false belief that successful people wake up feeling motivated every day. They imagine that high achievers have some magical relationship with their goals where everything feels easy and natural. Reality check. Successful people don't rely on what you think they do. They don't wait for inspiration to strike. They don't depend on feeling ready or excited or confident. In fact, most successful people feel the exact same resistance you do. The difference is they've learned to act anyway. Let me tell you about Sarah and Mike. Both decided to start a side business in January. Both had the same idea, the same resources, the same amount of free time. Sarah approached it the traditional way. She watched motivational videos every morning. She created a detailed vision board with pictures of her dream lifestyle. She followed successful entrepreneurs on social media and read inspiring quotes about hustle and passion. For the first 2 weeks, Sarah was unstoppable. She worked late into the night, fueled by excitement about her future success. Then, reality hit. The initial thrill wore off. Creating content felt harder than expected. Getting customers was more complex than the YouTube videos made it seem. The vision board stopped inspiring her and started mocking her lack of progress. By week 3, Sarah was making excuses. By week 5, she convinced herself the idea wasn't that good anyway. By February, she was back to complaining about her day job and promising herself she'd try again next year. Mike took a completely different approach. He never created a vision board. He didn't watch motivational content or pump himself up with inspiring quotes. Instead, he did something that seemed almost boring compared to Sarah's approach. He committed to working on his business for exactly 30 minutes every single day, regardless of how he felt. Some days he felt excited and worked longer. Most days he felt tired or uninspired or doubtful. But he showed up anyway, not because he wanted to, but because he had decided that's what he was going to do. 6 months later, Sarah was still planning and dreaming and waiting for the right moment to start again. Mike had a functioning business, generating income. not because he was more talented or motivated, but because he understood something Sarah didn't. Success isn't about feeling like doing something. It's about doing it, especially when you don't feel like it. This brings us to what psychologists are now calling the achievement gap. There's a specific psychological method that separates the 8% who succeed from the 92% who fail. It's not willpower, it's not motivation, it's not positive thinking or vision boards or morning affirmations. It's what researchers call forced consistency, and it completely changes how you approach any goal. Forced consistency works by removing choice from the equation. Instead of waking up each day and deciding whether you feel like working toward your goal, you make the decision once and then follow a system that doesn't care about your feelings. You create what psychologists call environmental and psychological forcing functions that make taking action the path of least resistance. The 8% who succeed have figured out how to make their goals inevitable. They don't rely on motivation because they know motivation is unreliable. They don't depend on willpower because willpower is limited. Instead, they build systems that force them to take action even when every part of them wants to quit. Especially when every part of them wants to quit. Here's what most people don't understand about that successful 8%. They experience the same doubts, the same resistance, the same lack of motivation as everyone else. The difference is they've learned to treat those feelings as irrelevant data. They've trained themselves to act based on their identity and commitments, not their emotions. This is where most goal-setting advice gets it completely wrong. Traditional approaches tell you to get motivated, visualize success, and then take action. But that sequence is backwards. Successful people take action first, then the motivation follows. They understand that you don't have to feel ready to start, you just have to start to feel ready. The method I'm about to share with you works because it bypasses all the psychological traps that catch 92% of people. It doesn't require you to feel motivated or inspired or confident. It doesn't depend on having the perfect plan or the right circumstances. It works when you're tired, when you're busy, when you're stressed, when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. But before you can master forced consistency, you need to understand exactly why your brain fights against your goals in the first place. There's a specific neurological process happening every time you face that internal battle between what you want to achieve and what feels comfortable in the moment. Why your brain sabotages your success. Your thinking brain knows exactly what you should do. Get up early, exercise, work on that project, make the sales calls. But your feeling brain has other plans. Stay comfortable, avoid effort, choose what feels good right now. This battle between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system happens every single day, and understanding why your feeling brain usually wins is the key to everything. You know that moment when you're lying in bed and your alarm goes off. Your goal was to wake up early and work out. You set that intention last night with complete certainty. But now your bed feels warm and perfect and the gym sounds cold and miserable. Your brain starts negotiating. Just 10 more minutes. You worked hard yesterday. You deserve rest. One day won't matter. Before you know it, you've hit snooze 3 times and your workout window is gone. This internal battle happens because your brain is literally designed to work against your long-term goals. Here's what 2025 neuroscience research reveals about why this happens. Your brain has 2 competing systems running simultaneously. Your thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, handles planning and long-term objectives. This is where your goals live. Your feeling brain, the limbic system, controls emotions and seeks immediate comfort. When your alarm goes off, your thinking brain says get up and exercise. Your feeling brain says stay comfortable and warm. Guess which one usually wins? The feeling brain is older, faster, and stronger. It's been keeping humans alive for thousands of years by avoiding discomfort and seeking pleasure. The problem gets worse when you understand how dopamine actually works. Most people think dopamine is released when you achieve something good. That's wrong. Dopamine floods your brain based on anticipation of reward, not the reward itself. When you set a goal and imagine achieving it, your brain gets a massive dopamine hit. This feels amazing, which is why planning and dreaming about success is so addictive. But here's the trap. Your brain starts treating the planning phase like the achievement phase. You get the reward without doing the work. This creates what researchers call motivation decay. The timeline is predictable and brutal. Week 1, your dopamine levels are sky high because everything feels new and exciting. Week 2, the novelty wears off and dopamine drops. Week 3, your brain realizes this goal requires consistent effort with delayed rewards, and dopamine crashes. By week 4, taking action feels harder than it did at the beginning because your brain is no longer getting chemical rewards from the goal itself. Stanford University's 2025 study tracked people's brain activity while they planned goals versus when they executed them. Planning lit up the reward centers like Christmas morning. Executing the actual behaviors barely registered. This explains why you can spend hours creating the perfect workout plan and feel accomplished without actually working out. Your brain got its dopamine fix from the planning phase. Vision boards make this problem worse, not better. When you stare at images of your ideal life, your brain releases dopamine as if you're already living that life. The visualization feels so real that your subconscious mind starts believing you've already achieved the goal. This reduces your motivation to take action because your brain thinks the work is already done. Studies show people who use vision boards are actually less likely to achieve their goals than people who don't visualize at all. The same thing happens with motivational content. Instagram quotes about hustle and success give you a quick dopamine hit that feels like progress. Watching videos about morning routines makes you feel productive without actually being productive. Reading about successful people tricks your brain into thinking you're taking steps towards success when you're just consuming content about it. This is what psychologists call fantasy achievement. You get stuck in an endless loop of planning, visualizing, and consuming motivational content while avoiding the actual work. Your feelings change constantly throughout the day based on your energy levels, stress, what you ate, how you slept, and 1,000 other variables. If you wait to feel motivated before taking action, you'll be waiting forever. Motivation is like weather. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it rains, sometimes there are storms. Successful people don't check the emotional weather before deciding whether to work toward their goals. They show up regardless of conditions. This is why relying on feelings guarantees inconsistency. Your emotions are designed to respond to immediate circumstances, not long-term objectives. When you're tired, your emotions will tell you to rest. When you're stressed, they'll tell you to avoid additional challenges. When you're comfortable, they'll tell you to stay comfortable. Your emotional system has no connection to your goal achievement system. They operate independently, and emotions almost always win the battle. Most people try to solve this by getting more motivated. They watch inspirational videos, read success stories, and pump themselves up with positive self-talk. This approach fails because it's fighting against how your brain actually works. You're trying to artificially create the emotional state that leads to action, instead of creating the systems that make action inevitable, regardless of your emotional state. Successful people understand something that failures don't. Discomfort isn't a problem to solve. It's information to use. When you feel resistance toward a goal-related action, that's your brain telling you this behavior isn't automatic yet. Instead of avoiding the discomfort, successful people lean into it. They've rewired their relationship with uncomfortable feelings. Where most people see resistance as a stop sign, they see it as a growth signal. This rewiring happens through repeated exposure. Every time you take action, despite feeling resistance, you're teaching your brain that uncomfortable feelings don't control your behavior. Every time you follow through when you don't feel like it, you're building what neuroscientists call executive control. Your prefrontal cortex gets stronger and your limbic system's influence gets weaker. But this only happens through practice, not through motivation or positive thinking. The brain changes through repetition, not inspiration. When you perform a new behavior, your prefrontal cortex has to work hard to override your automatic responses. This requires significant mental energy, which is why new habits feel difficult. But as you repeat the behavior, something interesting happens. Activity shifts from the prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia. a part of your brain that handles automatic behaviors. The behavior becomes easier and requires less conscious effort. This is why forcing yourself to take action when you don't feel like it isn't just about achieving your current goal. You're literally rewiring your brain to make discipline automatic. Each time you act despite resistance, you're building neural pathways that make future action easier. Each time you choose comfort over growth, you're strengthening the neural pathways that keep you stuck. The key is understanding that your brain's resistance to your goals isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do: keep you safe, comfortable, and alive. But safe, comfortable, and alive is not the same as successful, fulfilled, and growing. Achievement requires overriding your brain's default programming, and that happens when you stop relying on daily decisions and start building systems that make the right choices automatic. The psychology of forced action. This shift happens through what psychologists call identity-driven habits, a framework that eliminates the daily negotiation between what you should do and what you want to do. Instead of waking up each morning and deciding whether to work out, successful people decided months ago that they're the type of person who works out every morning. The decision was made once. Everything after that is just execution. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up and debate whether you feel motivated to brush your teeth today. You don't check your mood or energy levels first. You just do it because that's what people do. That's who you are. Someone who brushes their teeth. Elite performers apply this same automatic response to their goals. They don't rely on daily decisions because daily decisions are where goals go to die. Research from Northwestern University shows that the average person makes over 35,000 decisions per day. Each decision requires mental energy. By the time you've decided what to wear, what to eat for breakfast, which route to take to work, and answered dozens of emails, your brain is already exhausted. This is called decision fatigue, and it destroys goal achievement faster than anything else. When you rely on motivation and daily choices, you're asking your tired brain to make high-quality decisions about your future when it can barely decide what to have for lunch. Decision fatigue explains why you can start the day with perfect intentions and end it wondering what happened to your willpower. Your brain ran out of decision-making fuel hours ago. The solution is what psychologists call pre-commitment. Gallwitzer's 1999 research on implementation intentions showed that people who create specific if-then plans are significantly more likely to follow through on their goals. You make important decisions when your brain is fresh and your vision is clear. Then, you create systems that execute those decisions automatically. You remove choice from the equation entirely. This isn't about lacking willpower. It's about not needing willpower in the first place. But there's something even deeper happening here. Most people operate from emotion-driven behavior. They ask themselves how they feel. Then they act based on that feeling. If they feel motivated, they take action. If they feel tired or stressed or busy, they make excuses. Their feelings control their behavior, which means their results are completely unpredictable. Identity-driven behavior works differently. Instead of asking how you feel, you ask who you are. Your actions stem from your identity, not your emotions. This creates a fundamental shift in how you approach any goal. You stop saying, "I have to work out," and start saying, "I am someone who works out." You stop saying, "I need to write," and start saying, "I am a writer." The difference seems small, but the psychological impact is massive. Self-determination theory shows us that autonomous motivation, where behavior aligns with your chosen identity, yields better long-term adherence than external pressure or temporary enthusiasm. When you act from identity rather than obligation, the behavior feels more natural and sustainable. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Emma and Rachel both wanted to start a morning routine. Emma approached it the traditional way. She set her alarm for 6 a.m. and hoped she'd feel motivated enough to get up early. Some mornings she felt energetic and bounced out of bed, ready to conquer the day. Other mornings she felt tired and convinced herself she needed more sleep. Her morning routine happened when she felt like it, which wasn't very often. Rachel took a different approach. She decided she was the type of person who gets up at 6 a.m. every day. Not because she always felt like it, but because that's who she had chosen to become. On mornings when she felt tired, she still got up because tired people who get up at 6 a.m. is still part of her identity. On mornings when she felt energetic, she got up because that aligned with who she was. Her feelings became irrelevant to her behavior. 6 months later, Emma was still struggling with consistency and feeling frustrated with her lack of progress. Rachel had developed an unshakable morning routine that happened automatically regardless of her mood or circumstances. The difference wasn't willpower or motivation. Rachel had made the psychological shift from emotion-driven to identity-driven behavior. Research on habit formation supports this approach. Studies tracking people who started simple routines like flossing one tooth per day found that identity-based framing accelerated habit development. When participants thought, "I am someone who takes care of my teeth," rather than "I have to floss," the behavior became automatic faster and lasted longer. This shift changes everything about how you experience resistance. When you operate from "I have to," every action feels like a burden you're forcing on yourself. When you operate from "I'm someone who," every action feels like a natural expression of who you are. The resistance doesn't disappear, but it becomes irrelevant because your behavior isn't based on how you feel about the action. It's based on who you've decided to be. Identity-driven behavior also creates what researchers call behavioral momentum. Each time you act consistent with your chosen identity, you strengthen that identity. Each time you work out because you're someone who works out, you become more of someone who works out. Each time you write because you're a writer, you become more of a writer. Your identity and your actions reinforce each other in an upward spiral. This is where environmental design becomes crucial. You can't just decide to change your identity and expect it to stick. You need to create external systems that support and reinforce that identity. If you've decided you're someone who reads every day, you put books everywhere and remove distractions. If you've decided you're someone who eats healthy, you stock your kitchen with healthy food and eliminate junk food. You design your environment to make identity-consistent behavior the path of least resistance. Pre-commitment takes this even further. You create systems that make it harder to act inconsistent with your chosen identity than to act consistent with it. You sign up for a gym membership with a cancellation penalty. You schedule writing time in your calendar and treat it like a non-negotiable meeting. You tell people about your new identity and create social pressure to maintain it. You remove the option to negotiate with yourself in moments of weakness. Elite performers understand that discipline isn't a character trait you're born with or without. It's not about having superior willpower or motivation. Discipline is the result of intelligent systems that make good choices automatic and bad choices difficult. When you see someone who seems naturally disciplined, you're seeing someone who has created forcing functions that eliminate the need for moment-to-moment decision-making. But even with the strongest identity and the best systems, there's still that critical moment when you face resistance. That split second when your brain starts negotiating, making excuses, or looking for escape routes. This is where most people lose the battle. Not because there's the 10-second decision rule. The solution lies in a technique that exploits the exact moment when your brain switches from possibility to excuse-making. Northwestern University's neuroscience research reveals that you have a specific decision window where action can override resistance. But that window is incredibly small. The moment you think about taking action toward your goal, you have approximately 10 seconds before your brain shifts into decision fatigue mode and taking action becomes exponentially harder. Here's what happens neurologically during those 10 seconds. When you first think about doing something challenging, your prefrontal cortex activates and sends signals toward action. But simultaneously, your limbic system starts scanning for reasons to avoid discomfort. These two systems battle for control, and whichever one gets more activation wins. If you wait longer than 10 seconds, your limbic system almost always takes over because it's faster and more primitive than your prefrontal cortex. This creates the neurological window where action beats excuses. In those first 10 seconds, your prefrontal cortex has enough activation to override your comfort-seeking impulses. But you have to move fast. The longer you think about whether to take action, the more decision fatigue depletes your self-control and the more ammunition your brain creates for staying comfortable. Hesitation literally kills action at the neurological level. The technique that exploits this window is deceptively simple. The moment you think about doing something toward your goal, you count backwards from 5 to 1, then immediately take physical action. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. The countdown serves as a pattern interrupt that stops your brain from generating excuses and forces your prefrontal cortex to stay in control. Why backwards counting instead of forwards? Your brain is used to forward counting from childhood games and activities. Forward counting feels familiar and gives your limbic system time to interfere. Backwards counting requires more cognitive effort, which keeps your prefrontal cortex engaged and prevents your excuse-making system from taking over. The countdown literally hijacks your brain's attention and directs it toward action instead of avoidance. Mental contrasting research shows that shorter decision windows improve follow-through because they prevent the brain from generating competing scenarios. A 5-second countdown maintains urgency while giving you just enough time to override resistance. Counting too slowly defeats the purpose because it allows decision fatigue to creep in and weaken your resolve. Here are the exact steps for implementing the 5-second rule. First, the moment you think about taking action toward your goal, immediately start counting backwards from 5. Don't think about whether you feel like doing it or whether it's the perfect time. Just start counting. Second, count out loud if possible because engaging your voice adds another layer of commitment. Third, when you reach 1, immediately take the smallest possible physical action related to your goal. If your goal is exercise, put on your workout shoes. If your goal is writing, open your laptop. If your goal is eating better, walk to the kitchen and grab a healthy snack. The key is taking physical action, not mental action. Thinking about your goal doesn't count. Planning your approach doesn't count. Reviewing your motivation doesn't count. You need to move your body because physical movement activates your prefrontal cortex and creates momentum toward continued action. Once you take that first physical step, taking the second step becomes significantly easier. This technique rewires your brain's response to resistance over time through neuroplasticity. Every time you use the 5-second rule to override hesitation, you strengthen the neural pathway between thinking about action and taking action. Every time you let hesitation win, you strengthen the neural pathway between thinking about action and making excuses. The more you practice rapid action, the more automatic it becomes. After using this technique consistently for several weeks, something interesting happens. The gap between thinking about doing something and actually doing it shrinks. You start taking action faster and with less internal resistance. The countdown becomes unnecessary because your brain learns to associate the thought of action with immediate movement instead of prolonged deliberation. Let me give you practical examples of applying this rule to different types of goals. For fitness goals, the moment you think about working out, count down and immediately put on your workout clothes or grab your water bottle. For learning goals, when you think about studying or practicing, count down and open your book or instrument. For business goals, when you think about working on your project, count down and open the relevant document or application. For relationship goals, when you think about calling someone important, count down and pick up your phone. The rule works for preventing bad habits too. When you think about scrolling social media during work time, count down and close the app. When you think about eating junk food, count down and drink water instead. When you think about hitting snooze, count down and put your feet on the floor. You're using the same neurological window to interrupt negative patterns before they start. Most people make 3 critical mistakes when trying to implement rapid action techniques. First, they count too slowly. The countdown should take about 3 seconds total, not 5. Count fast enough to maintain urgency, but clear enough to stay focused. Second, they negotiate during the countdown. Your brain will try to talk you out of action while you're counting. Ignore these thoughts completely and keep counting. Third, they take mental action instead of physical action. Opening an app on your phone, counts as physical action. Thinking about what you'll write doesn't count. Another common mistake is making the first action too big. If your goal is to work out for an hour, don't expect yourself to jump straight into intense exercise after the countdown. Instead, count down and put on your shoes. That single action creates momentum that makes the next action easier. Small physical actions compound into bigger actions naturally, but only if you start with something so small, it's impossible to fail. This simple technique becomes a powerful habit that builds on itself because success breeds success. Each time you use the countdown to take action, you prove to yourself that you can override resistance. Each small victory increases your confidence in your ability to force yourself when necessary. The technique transforms from a conscious tool into an automatic response to resistance. The 5-second rule works because it treats your brain like the predictable machine it is, rather than expecting it to behave differently than it's designed to behave. But even with this technique mastered, there's still a deeper psychological shift that separates people who achieve their goals from those who don't. It's about fundamentally changing how you experience the discomfort that comes with growth. Rewriting your pain-pleasure operating system. This shift happens when you understand that your brain's pain-pleasure system has been hijacked by modern life. The choices that feel good in the moment are usually the ones that create pain later. Hitting snooze feels better than getting up early, but it creates the pain of rushing through your morning and feeling behind all day. Scrolling your phone feels better than working on your goals, but it creates the pain of another day without progress. Eating junk food feels better than preparing healthy meals, but it creates the pain of low energy and poor health. Every easy choice you make today becomes a hard consequence you face tomorrow. Your brain evolved to seek immediate pleasure and avoid immediate pain because that's what kept humans alive thousands of years ago. If you found food, you ate it immediately because you didn't know when you'd find more. If you felt tired, you rested because exhaustion could mean death. If something felt uncomfortable, you avoided it because discomfort often meant danger. These responses served our ancestors well in a world of scarcity and constant threats. But now, you live in a world of abundance, where immediate pleasures are everywhere and most discomfort isn't dangerous. Your ancient brain still operates on the old programming, constantly pushing you toward instant gratification and away from anything that feels challenging. Social media gives you instant dopamine hits. Fast food satisfies your cravings immediately. Streaming services provide instant entertainment. Your brain gets hijacked by these modern pleasures and loses sight of long-term consequences. This creates a massive problem for goal achievement. Every goal worth pursuing requires you to choose temporary discomfort for long-term benefit. Building a business means working long hours now for financial freedom later. Getting fit means exercising when you don't feel like it for health and confidence later. Learning new skills means struggling through confusion and mistakes now for expertise later. Your brain's default programming works against every meaningful goal you could set. 2025 research on delayed gratification shows that the ability to choose important tasks over immediate pleasures is the single strongest predictor of long-term success. People who can delay gratification earn more money, have better relationships, enjoy better health, and report higher life satisfaction than people who prioritize immediate pleasure. Self-determination theory reveals that intrinsic motivation, where behavior aligns with your personal values and identity, creates more sustainable change than external rewards or pressure. When you connect difficult actions to your deeper sense of purpose, the discomfort becomes meaningful rather than pointless. But here's what most people miss about delayed gratification. It's not about willpower or self-control. It's about rewiring your pain-pleasure associations so that taking action toward your goals feels good and avoiding action feels bad. You need to flip the script on how your brain evaluates immediate versus delayed consequences. The looking forward technique from motivational interviewing research provides a concrete way to make abstract long-term consequences feel immediate and real. Instead of thinking vaguely about how you'll feel if you don't achieve your goal, you create a specific mental picture of yourself 1 year from now having made no progress. Visualize the exact conversation you'll have with yourself. What excuses will you be making? What opportunities will you have missed? What will your daily routine look like? The key is making the visualization specific and personal. Your brain responds to concrete details, not abstract concepts. This technique works because it activates the same neural pathways that respond to immediate threats, making future consequences feel present and urgent. When you can clearly see the pain of staying stuck, your brain naturally wants to avoid that pain by taking action today. But you have to be careful not to fall into the vision board trap. Research shows that visualizing positive outcomes can backfire by prematurely activating reward circuits, giving your brain a dopamine hit that reduces motivation to do the actual work. At the same time, you need to associate immediate pleasure with difficult tasks, instead of seeing them as pure sacrifice. This doesn't mean lying to yourself about difficulty. It means finding genuine sources of satisfaction within challenging activities. When you exercise, focus on how good your body feels when you move, rather than how tired you are. When you work on your business, focus on the excitement of building something, rather than the stress of the workload. When you eat healthy food, focus on how energized you feel, rather than what you're giving up. This mental reframing transforms discomfort from a signal to stop into a signal that you're growing. Most people experience resistance and think something is wrong. You're going to train yourself to experience resistance and think something is right. Discomfort becomes evidence that you're doing something important, something that will make you stronger, something that separates you from people who choose comfort over growth. Every time you choose a small, uncomfortable action over a comfortable one, you build your capacity to handle bigger challenges. Every time you get up when you don't want to, every time you work when you'd rather relax, every time you eat healthy when you crave junk food, you're depositing resilience into your mental bank account. These small daily challenges create the strength to handle major obstacles when they appear. Instead of seeing exercise as punishment for eating too much, see it as investing in your future energy and confidence. Instead of seeing healthy eating as deprivation, see it as fueling your body for peak performance. Instead of seeing work as something you have to do, see it as building the life you want to live. Instead of seeing learning as boring or difficult, see it as gaining capabilities that make you more valuable. This shift requires you to celebrate the feeling of resistance rather than trying to eliminate it. When you feel that familiar discomfort that comes with challenging tasks, instead of thinking, "This sucks," start thinking, "This is exactly where I need to be." Resistance becomes your compass pointing toward growth. The stronger the resistance, the more important the action probably is for your development. When you master this mental shift, forcing yourself becomes unnecessary because you've rewired what feels good and what feels bad. Taking action toward your goals feels good because you associate it with growth and progress. Avoiding action feels bad because you associate it with stagnation and regret. Your brain's natural tendency to seek pleasure and avoid pain starts working in your favor instead of against you. But even with the right mindset, there's still the practical challenge of where to begin when your goal feels impossibly large and overwhelming. The minimum viable progress strategy. The solution is what researchers call microforcing, a strategy that exploits how your brain processes difficulty by starting with actions so small they bypass resistance entirely. Recent habit formation studies show that neural pathways strengthen significantly within the median time frame of 59 to 66 days, but only when you consistently repeat the behavior. The key insight is that tiny actions create these pathways faster than large ones, because your brain doesn't activate its threat detection system for minimal effort. When you commit to writing a book, your brain calculates the effort required for the entire project and feels overwhelmed. When you commit to writing one sentence, your brain barely registers the task as effort at all. But here's what happens after you write that one sentence. You're already sitting at your desk with your computer open and your thoughts flowing. Writing a second sentence requires almost no additional effort. Writing a paragraph feels natural. Before you know it, you've written for 20 minutes without even realizing it. This is the psychology behind why 2 minutes of action beats 2 hours of planning. Planning engages your analytical brain, which loves to identify problems, complications, and reasons why something might not work. Taking action, even tiny action, engages your momentum brain, which focuses on the next logical step rather than the entire journey. A 2025 study shows that people who spend 2 minutes taking action toward their goal are 3 times more likely to continue working than people who spend 2 hours planning their approach. The magic happens through what researchers call minimum viable progress. Tiny actions unlock bigger ones because they change your psychological state from thinking about doing something to actually doing it. When you do 1 push-up, you're no longer someone who needs to start exercising. You're someone who is exercising. That identity shift, however small, makes the second push-up easier than the first, the third easier than the second. Before you know it, you've completed a full workout that started with a single movement. Minimum viable progress works because it eliminates the massive psychological barrier between intention and action. The hardest part of any goal isn't doing the work, it's starting the work. Once you start, continuing becomes significantly easier because you've already overcome the initial resistance. Your brain shifts from generating excuses to generating momentum. The key is identifying the smallest possible version of any goal-related action. If your goal is to read more, the minimum viable action isn't reading for 30 minutes. It's opening a book. If your goal is to eat healthier, the minimum viable action isn't preparing an entire meal plan. It's eating 1 piece of fruit. If your goal is to network more, the minimum viable action isn't attending a networking event. It's sending 1 message to someone in your field. These actions might seem ridiculously small, but that's exactly why they work. Your brain can't generate reasonable excuses for doing something that takes less than 2 minutes and requires minimal effort. It's harder to talk yourself out of writing 1 sentence than to just write the sentence. It's easier to do 1 push-up than to spend 10 minutes convincing yourself you're too tired to exercise. Research on neuroplasticity shows that micro-commitments build neural pathways for larger behaviors. Every time you write 1 sentence, you strengthen the neural connections associated with writing. Every time you do 1 push-up, you reinforce the neural pathways connected to exercise. Every time you make 1 healthy food choice, you build the mental circuitry that supports healthy eating. These tiny actions literally rewire your brain to make bigger actions more automatic and less effortful. The compound effect of small actions is where the real magic happens. 1 sentence doesn't make you a writer, but 1 sentence every day for a year creates a book. 1 push-up doesn't make you fit, but 1 push-up that turns into 5, then 10, then a full workout routine transforms your body and health. 1 healthy meal doesn't change your life, but the habit of making slightly better food choices compounds into dramatic improvements over time. Most people resist thinking small because it feels insignificant. Your ego wants to make dramatic changes and see immediate results. Starting with tiny actions feels like you're not really trying or not taking your goals seriously. This mental resistance is actually your biggest enemy because it keeps you stuck in the planning phase instead of moving into the action phase. Thinking small is actually thinking smart because it works with human psychology instead of against it. Your brain is designed to resist big changes and embrace small ones. Big changes trigger fear and avoidance. Small changes feel safe and manageable. By starting smaller than your brain can reasonably object to, you bypass resistance entirely and create forward momentum that builds naturally. The beauty of minimum viable progress is that it's impossible to fail. You can't fail at writing 1 sentence. You can't fail at doing 1 push-up. You can't fail at eating 1 healthy snack. The bar is set so low that success is inevitable, and success breeds more success. Each small win builds confidence and creates positive momentum that carries over into bigger actions. What starts as 1 sentence becomes a paragraph, then a page, then a chapter. What starts as 1 push-up becomes 5, then 10, then a full workout routine. What starts as 1 healthy choice becomes a pattern of better decisions throughout the day. The tiny actions compound not just through repetition, but through the psychological momentum they create. 6 months from now, you'll look back and realize that the smallest actions created the biggest changes. Not because the actions themselves were significant, but because they started a process that grew naturally into something much larger. The person who writes one sentence every day for 6 months doesn't just have more words on paper. They've become a writer. The person who does one push-up that grows into a daily routine hasn't just gotten stronger. They've become someone who exercises consistently. The power lies not in the size of the action, but in the consistency of taking it. But consistency brings its own challenge because the moment you miss a day or fall short of your expectations, there's another voice that kicks in. The voice that can either push you forward or tear you down completely. Building your internal accountability system. That voice determines whether you become your own greatest coach or your harshest critic. You miss your workout 3 days in a row, your internal voice kicks in immediately. You're so lazy. You always start things and never finish them. Why can't you just stick to anything? You're never going to reach your goals at this rate. Sound familiar? This voice in your head that's supposed to help you stay accountable has become your biggest enemy. Instead of pushing you forward, it tears you down. Instead of building consistency, it destroys your confidence. Most people think being hard on themselves creates discipline, but research shows the opposite is true. Self-criticism is the fastest way to kill motivation and guarantee failure. Sports psychology reveals something counterintuitive about peak performance. Elite athletes don't succeed because they're harder on themselves than everyone else. When a professional tennis player misses a shot, they analyze what went wrong, adjust their technique, and focus on the next shot, rather than spending 5 minutes in self-attack mode. They succeed because they've learned to coach themselves instead of criticize themselves. They treat themselves like a coach would treat a valuable player, not like a critic would treat a failure. The difference between self-coaching and self-criticism changes everything about how you respond to setbacks and mistakes. Self-criticism focuses on what's wrong with you as a person. I'm lazy. I'm undisciplined. I'm not cut out for this. Self-coaching focuses on what can be improved in your approach. That didn't work. What can I learn from this? How can I adjust my strategy? The first approach destroys confidence and creates a negative spiral. The second approach builds resilience and creates forward momentum. Your internal dialogue affects your performance and goal achievement more than any external factor. The conversation happening in your head determines whether you bounce back from setbacks or get crushed by them. Whether you take action when things get difficult or make excuses and quit. Whether you see challenges as opportunities to grow or evidence that you should give up. Most people let this internal dialogue run on autopilot, which means it defaults to criticism and negativity. Successful people take control of this dialogue and turn it into their most powerful tool. This is where 2025 research on self-compassion reveals something that surprised even the scientists studying it. Self-compassion has a stronger impact on discipline and long-term goal achievement than self-criticism. People who treat themselves with kindness during failures are more likely to get back on track quickly and maintain consistency over time. This goes against everything most people believe about motivation and accountability. We think being tough on ourselves creates toughness. The research shows it creates brittleness. Self-compassion doesn't mean making excuses or lowering standards. It means responding to your mistakes the way you would respond to a good friend's mistakes, with understanding, support, and practical help instead of judgment and attack. When you miss a workout, instead of calling yourself lazy, you acknowledge that everyone misses workouts sometimes and focus on what you can do today to get back on track. This approach creates psychological safety that makes it easier to face challenges and take risks. Creating an internal coach voice requires specific techniques that replace destructive self-talk with constructive feedback. First, you separate your actions from who you are as a person. Instead of saying, I'm a failure because I didn't stick to my diet, you say, I made some food choices that didn't align with my goals, and I can make better choices starting now. This keeps mistakes in perspective and prevents them from becoming self-defeating stories about your character. The internal coach voice asks different questions than the internal critic voice. The critic asks, "What's wrong with me?" The coach asks, "What can I learn from this?" The critic says, "I always mess things up." The coach says, "This didn't work, so what will I try differently next time?" The critic focuses on past failures. The coach focuses on future improvements. These small shifts in language create massive shifts in psychology. Future self-visualization research shows that people who regularly connect with their future selves are twice as likely to align their daily actions with their long-term goals. Instead of attacking yourself for current mistakes, you visualize the person you're becoming through consistent action. You see yourself 6 months from now having built the habits you're working on today. This technique transforms setbacks from character attacks into temporary detours on a clear path forward. Understanding the difference between productive guilt and destructive shame changes how you process setbacks completely. Productive guilt focuses on specific actions you can change. I feel bad about eating junk food for lunch, so I'm going to pack a healthy lunch tomorrow. Destructive shame attacks your entire character. I'm such a failure for eating junk food. I have no self-control, and I never will. Productive guilt motivates corrective action. Destructive shame creates paralysis and self-sabotage. Successful people use specific language patterns in their self-talk that unsuccessful people don't. They use words like yet and still learning and next time that assume improvement is possible. Instead of I can't do this, they say I can't do this yet. Instead of I'm bad at this, they say I'm still learning this. Instead of I failed again, they say next time I'll try a different approach. These language patterns create a growth mindset that sees challenges as temporary rather than permanent. Reframing failure as data rather than defeat requires a fundamental shift in how you define failure itself. Most people define failure as not achieving the desired outcome, but that definition makes learning impossible because it labels any mistake as evidence of inadequacy. A better definition treats failure as information about what doesn't work, which is just as valuable as information about what does work. Every failed attempt teaches you something that brings you closer to success. When you miss your workout, the data might tell you that evening workouts don't work well with your schedule and you should try morning workouts instead. When you break your diet, the data might tell you that restricting too many foods at once creates cravings, and you should focus on adding healthy foods before removing unhealthy ones. When you procrastinate on your business project, the data might tell you that the task feels overwhelming, and you should break it into smaller pieces. None of these situations represent personal failure. They represent useful information about what adjustments to make. This internal accountability system becomes your most powerful tool for maintaining consistency because it eliminates the psychological barriers that stop most people from bouncing back quickly from setbacks. When your internal voice supports you instead of attacking you, taking action feels safer. When mistakes become data instead of disasters, you're more willing to take risks and try new approaches. When setbacks build momentum instead of breaking it, consistency becomes automatic because you never really stop moving forward, you just adjust direction. The environmental force multiplier. Your environment is quietly sabotaging your goals every single day, and you don't even realize it. You walk into your kitchen and automatically reach for the bag of chips sitting on the counter. You sit down at your desk and immediately open social media because your phone is right there next to your laptop. You get home from work exhausted and collapse on the couch because that's where you always sit when you walk through the door. These aren't failures of willpower or motivation. These are predictable responses to environmental cues that your brain processes faster than your conscious mind can intervene. Environmental forcing works by designing your surroundings to make good choices automatic and bad choices difficult. Instead of relying on willpower to resist temptation, you remove the temptation entirely. Instead of hoping you'll remember to take action toward your goals, you create visual reminders that trigger action without conscious thought. Your environment becomes a silent partner that pushes you toward success, even when your motivation is non-existent. The psychology behind environmental cues reveals why your surroundings have more power over your behavior than your conscious intentions. Your brain processes environmental information constantly, scanning for patterns and triggers that suggest certain actions. When you see workout clothes laid out on your bed, your brain starts preparing for exercise before you consciously decide to work out. When you see healthy food at eye level in your refrigerator, your brain primes you to make better eating choices. These cues work below the level of conscious awareness, which is why they're so powerful and why most people underestimate their impact. Choice architecture research shows that physical spaces influence decision-making by determining which choices feel easy and which choices feel difficult. The way objects are arranged in your environment creates automatic behavioral nudges that guide your actions throughout the day. You can use this principle to increase your success by placing goal-supporting items in prominent locations and goal-sabotaging items in inconvenient places. The most effective technique for designing your environment to eliminate bad choices is called removal and replacement. First, you physically remove items that make bad choices easy. If your goal is to eat healthier, you remove junk food from your kitchen entirely. If your goal is to be more productive, you remove your phone from your workspace. If your goal is to read more, you remove the television from your bedroom. Removal alone isn't enough because it creates a vacuum that your brain will try to fill with other distractions. That's where replacement comes in. You replace the removed items with things that support your goals. Healthy snacks replace junk food. Books replace your phone. A comfortable reading chair replaces the television. Creating forcing functions in your daily environment means setting up automatic systems that make certain behaviors inevitable. A forcing function is an environmental design that prevents you from avoiding a desired action or makes an undesired action impossible. Setting up automatic bill payments creates a forcing function that prevents late fees. Packing your gym bag the night before and leaving it by your front door creates a forcing function that makes it harder to skip your workout. Meal prepping on Sundays creates a forcing function that makes healthy eating automatic during busy weekdays. Friction design takes environmental forcing to the next level by making good choices easier and bad choices harder. You add friction to behaviors you want to avoid and remove friction from behaviors you want to encourage. Self-nudging research shows that simple physical barriers create powerful behavioral changes. If you want to stop checking social media during work hours, you hide your phone in a locked drawer and log out of all apps, adding multiple steps before you can access distractions. If you want to drink more water, you fill a large water bottle and keep it on your desk, removing all friction from staying hydrated throughout the day. The principle works differently for different types of goals, but the core concept remains the same. For fitness goals, you might set up a home gym area with equipment visible and easily accessible while storing comfortable clothes in hard-to-reach places. For learning goals, you might create a dedicated study space with all necessary materials within arm's reach, while removing anything that could serve as a distraction. For business goals, you might organize your workspace so that important projects are always visible and urgent tasks have designated spaces that prevent them from getting lost in clutter. Environmental changes for productivity might include using website blockers during work hours, organizing your desk so that important tasks are physically in front of you, and creating separate spaces for different types of work to signal context switches to your brain. For health goals, you might prep healthy snacks in advance and store them at eye level while placing less healthy options in opaque containers in hard-to-reach cabinets. For relationship goals, you might create phone-free zones in your home to encourage face-to-face conversation and keep meaningful conversation starter questions visible in common areas. Modifying environments you can't fully control requires strategic adaptation and creative problem-solving. At work, you might not be able to control what snacks are available in the break room, but you can bring your own healthy options and keep them prominently displayed on your desk. You might not be able to eliminate all noise distractions in a busy office, but you can use noise-canceling headphones and position your workspace to minimize visual distractions. You might not be able to control your family's eating habits, but you can designate specific shelves in the refrigerator and pantry for your healthy food choices. The key to working within constraints is focusing on the elements you can influence rather than feeling powerless about the elements you cannot change. Even small environmental modifications create significant behavioral changes over time. Changing your phone's wallpaper to an image related to your goal serves as a constant visual reminder. Rearranging furniture to create a more conducive workspace for focused work can dramatically improve productivity. Setting up automatic systems for recurring tasks removes decision points that drain mental energy. Environmental design reduces the need for willpower by making desired behaviors feel natural and automatic rather than forced and effortful. When your environment supports your goals, good choices become the path of least resistance. You don't have to fight against your surroundings or constantly make conscious decisions about what to do next. The environment guides you toward success through carefully designed cues and systems that work with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. The most powerful aspect of environmental forcing is that it works continuously, even when you're tired, stressed, distracted, or unmotivated. Your physical surroundings don't have bad days or mood swings. They consistently provide the same cues and create the same behavioral nudges regardless of how you feel. This creates a stable foundation for goal achievement that doesn't depend on fluctuating internal states or external circumstances. But your physical environment is only half the equation. The other half involves forces that are even more powerful and harder to control. The social forcing framework. The people around you are either pushing you toward your goals or pulling you away from them every single day. There's no neutral ground here. Your coworker who complains about being tired every morning makes it easier for you to skip your early workout. Your friend who orders dessert every time you eat together makes it harder to stick to your healthy eating plan. Your family member who questions why you're working on a side project makes it easier to doubt yourself and quit. But flip this dynamic and something powerful happens. Surround yourself with people who exercise regularly, and working out starts feeling normal instead of extraordinary. Spend time with people building businesses, and your own entrepreneurial efforts feel less crazy and more inevitable. This is social forcing in action. Instead of relying solely on your internal motivation and discipline, you create external relationships that make achieving your goals feel automatic. Your social environment becomes a system of accountability that works even when your personal willpower is running low. The people in your life stop being neutral observers and become active participants in your success. Social proof explains why this works so effectively. Your brain constantly scans your environment to determine what behaviors are normal and acceptable. When you see other people doing something consistently, your brain categorizes that behavior as standard rather than exceptional. If everyone around you watches television after work, your brain treats watching television as the normal evening activity. If everyone around you works on personal projects after work, your brain treats productive evening activities as standard behavior. You unconsciously adopt the patterns you see most frequently in your immediate social circle. Research reveals the dramatic power of public commitment. When you keep goals private, only 35% of people achieve them. When you share your goals with others, that number jumps to 70%. The simple act of telling other people what you're trying to accomplish nearly doubles your chances of success. This happens because public commitment creates what psychologists call social consequences. Breaking a private promise to yourself feels bad. Breaking a public promise to others feels much worse. Creating forcing partnerships with people pursuing similar goals amplifies this effect even further. You actively partner with someone who has skin in the game, creating mutual accountability systems that keep both of you moving forward. The key to effective forcing partnerships is finding someone with complementary strengths and similar commitment levels, where each person's strengths compensate for the other person's weaknesses. Communicating your goals in ways that create supportive pressure requires strategic thinking about how you frame your commitments. Instead of saying you want to get in shape, you tell people you're training for a specific event that has a fixed date. Instead of saying you want to start a business, you tell people you're launching a specific product by a specific deadline. Instead of saying you want to read more, you tell people you're reading 50 books this year and ask them to check in with you monthly about your progress. The specificity and timeline create natural pressure points where people will expect updates and results. Social consequences work because they make quitting more painful than continuing. When you tell your workout partner you'll meet them at the gym at 6 a.m., not showing up means disappointing someone who made an effort to be there for you. When you tell your family you're writing a book and ask them to help you stay accountable, giving up means admitting failure to the people whose opinions matter most to you. When you post about your goals on social media, quitting means publicly acknowledging that you couldn't follow through on something you were confident enough to share with hundreds of people. But social forcing doesn't require you to depend entirely on other people's schedules or motivation levels. You can structure accountability systems that provide social pressure without requiring constant input from others. Joining online communities focused on your specific goal creates accountability through regular check-ins and progress sharing. Using apps that connect you with other people working towards similar objectives creates automatic accountability through leaderboards and progress comparisons. Participating in group challenges creates social pressure through competition and peer recognition. The most effective approach combines active partnerships with passive social systems. You might have one close accountability partner who you check in with weekly, while also participating in an online community where you share monthly progress updates. You might tell your family about your goals to create household-level accountability, while also joining local groups focused on similar objectives. Multiple layers of social accountability create redundancy that keeps you moving forward, even when individual relationships or systems temporarily fail. Handling unsupportive people in your environment requires clear boundaries and strategic communication. Some people will question your goals not because they want to sabotage you, but because your growth makes them uncomfortable about their own lack of progress. Others will actively discourage you because they benefit from keeping you in your current situation. The solution isn't to cut everyone out of your life, but to limit how much influence negative voices have over your decision-making process. You can acknowledge people's concerns without letting those concerns derail your progress. When someone questions whether your goal is realistic, you can thank them for their input while explaining that you've already decided to pursue the goal regardless of the challenges. When someone suggests you're taking on too much, you can appreciate their concern while clarifying that you've structured your approach to be sustainable. The key is responding without defending, which keeps you focused on your own path instead of getting pulled into debates about your choices. Creating boundaries with unsupportive people often means having fewer conversations about your goals with certain individuals, while increasing those conversations with people who genuinely support your growth. You share progress updates with people who celebrate your wins and offer constructive help during challenges. You limit goal-related discussions with people who consistently respond with skepticism or discouragement. This isn't about avoiding all criticism, but about getting feedback from people who want to see you succeed, rather than people who seem invested in keeping you where you are. Social forcing creates a network effect that makes achievement feel inevitable rather than optional. When multiple people in your life know about your goals, expect progress, and provide various forms of support and accountability, maintaining momentum becomes significantly easier than stopping. The combined pressure from different relationships and social systems creates multiple reasons to keep going and multiple consequences for quitting. Your goals transform from private wishes into public commitments that other people are actively helping you achieve. But even the strongest social systems and environmental designs can't replace the most powerful force of all: the force that comes from understanding exactly who you're becoming with every choice you make. the legacy perspective method. This understanding leads directly to the legacy perspective method, a technique that connects every choice you make right now to the person you're becoming over time. What version of yourself are you creating with the choice you make right now? Not tomorrow or next week or when you feel ready, but with the specific decision sitting in front of you at this exact moment. Every single choice you make is casting a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Skip the workout and you vote for someone who prioritizes comfort over health. Choose the easy task over the important one, and you vote for someone who avoids challenge. Make an excuse instead of taking action, and you vote for someone who lets circumstances control their life. The person you'll be 5 years from now is being shaped by what you choose to do in the next 5 minutes. Future self-visualization works because it connects your abstract long-term goals with immediate emotional motivation. Stanford University's 2025 research reveals that people who regularly visualize their future selves are twice as likely to make choices that align with their long-term objectives. Your brain struggles to care about abstract future benefits, but responds powerfully to vivid images of who you could become. When you can clearly see the person you're working toward becoming, present actions feel less like sacrifice and more like investment. The technique requires specific visualization practices that make your future self feel real rather than imaginary. You don't just think about being successful or healthy or accomplished in vague terms. You create detailed mental pictures of your future self living the life your current actions are building toward. You see yourself waking up in the morning feeling energetic and strong because you made consistent healthy choices over years. You see yourself confidently handling challenges in your career because you spent countless hours developing skills when others were watching television. You see yourself surrounded by meaningful relationships because you chose to invest time in people instead of distractions. Legacy thinking transforms every mundane action into something significant by viewing it through the lens of long-term impact. Instead of seeing today's workout as just another exercise session, you see it as one more deposit into your future health and vitality. Instead of viewing today's work on your side project as just another evening task, you see it as building the foundation for your eventual freedom and success. Instead of treating today's difficult conversation as just another uncomfortable moment, you see it as strengthening your ability to handle future challenges with courage and integrity. This perspective shift changes your relationship with discomfort completely. When you understand that today's struggle is creating tomorrow's strength, resistance becomes welcome instead of something to avoid. The difficulty you feel while learning a new skill isn't punishment. It's your brain building new capabilities that your future self will use to achieve things your current self can't imagine. The tiredness you feel after pushing through a challenging day isn't suffering. It's evidence that you're expanding your capacity to handle bigger challenges and opportunities. Research on mortality awareness shows that people who regularly think about their limited time on Earth make dramatically different choices than people who live if they have unlimited time. Viktor Frankl observed that those who found meaning in their suffering could endure almost anything, while those who saw no purpose collapsed under far less pressure. When you truly understand that your days are numbered, wasting time on meaningless activities becomes psychologically painful. Postponing important goals until someday feels reckless instead of reasonable. Waiting for perfect conditions feels like choosing regret over progress. Making abstract future consequences feel immediate requires specific mental exercises that bridge the gap between today and decades from now. One powerful technique involves writing a letter from your 80-year-old self to your current self, but you can simplify this into 3 immediate prompts. What would your future self thank you for doing consistently starting today? What habits would they warn you to stop before they compound into bigger problems? What opportunities would they tell you to pursue while you still have the energy and time? These questions make long-term consequences feel personal and immediate instead of theoretical and distant. Self-determination theory research shows that self-compassion actually improves goal adherence by reducing the shame and self-criticism that often derail progress. When you view your journey toward your future self with kindness rather than harsh judgment, you're more likely to bounce back from setbacks and maintain consistency over time. This balance between future focus and present acceptance creates sustainable motivation that doesn't depend on perfect performance. Identity trajectory thinking means recognizing that you're not a fixed person trying to achieve goals. You're a person in the process of becoming someone different, and your daily choices determine the direction of that transformation. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you move toward becoming someone for whom discipline feels natural. Every time you choose growth over safety, you move toward becoming someone who thrives on challenge. Every time you choose action over procrastination, you move toward becoming someone who gets things done consistently. The trajectory concept reveals why forcing yourself becomes easier over time instead of harder. You're not fighting against your natural personality forever. You're gradually becoming the type of person who naturally makes choices that used to require significant effort. The person you're becoming through consistent daily choices eventually makes those choices automatically because they align with who you've become rather than conflicting with who you used to be. Maintaining this perspective during difficult moments requires predetermined mental frameworks that kick in when motivation disappears. When you don't feel like taking action toward your goals, you remind yourself that this exact moment is when your future self gets created. Comfortable moments don't build character or capability. Challenging moments do. The choice you make when you don't feel like making the right choice determines whether you become someone who follows through regardless of feelings or someone who only acts when conditions are perfect. The power of legacy thinking becomes most apparent during moments of resistance, because that's when you realize you're not just avoiding a single workout or work session. You're choosing between two different life paths. One path leads to the person who consistently did what needed to be done, even when it felt difficult. The other leads to the person who had good intentions but let feelings determine actions. Both versions of your future self are equally possible, and every moment of resistance is actually an opportunity to choose which version becomes reality. The transformation happens through action, not insight. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Forcing yourself isn't about becoming someone different. It's about cultivating the disciplined person you become through consistent action. Every technique I've shared works because it removes the barriers preventing your growth. Stop waiting for motivation to magically appear. The 3 most practical techniques from this video are the 5-second countdown rule to bypass hesitation, microforcing with actions so small they eliminate resistance, and environmental design that makes good choices automatic. Pick one technique and use it today, right now, not tomorrow, when you feel ready. Apply one method today and comment below with your experience.